Have you ever seen one of those pictures that shows something that is clearly modern that's been plunked right into a vintage or even ancient scene? They have a word for that, and it's called anachronism, a juxtaposition of people or objects from two different periods of time. Well, many of those images are pretty funny, but I have some anachronisms to show you that indicate something that really isn't funny at all. In fact, those anachronisms actually point to something extremely dangerous. Hi, I'm Dolly Weber. Believe it or not, the anachronisms I'm referring to we now find right in our King James Bibles. I guarantee that if you go get the oldest copy you have, you will find those anachronisms there as well. The anachronisms were not there just a few years ago. Yes, I am saying that the changes are happening supernaturally, and in fact, tens of thousands of changes have taken place and continue on an ongoing basis. Even those speaking other languages confirm the changes in their translations as well. The prophet Daniel was shown by the Lord, and John the Revelator was warned that the protection on scriptures from Satan's tampering would be removed at the very end of time. That's where we are today, and I'm about to prove it to you. First, we have ferry boats. Ferry boats appears in a historical context of 1053 to 1012 BC. Ferry boats weren't even invented until 1811 AD. It appears in one verse, 2 Samuel 19:18, and there went over a ferry boat to carry over the king's household and to do what he thought good. Next, we have a bank, a financial bank. It's used in the historical context of the 1st century AD as if Jesus had spoken it. Yet the first bank as an institution did not come until 1397 AD. This word appears in one verse, Luke 19:23. Wherefore then gavest not thou my money into the bank, that at my coming I might have required mine own with usury? We also have furniture. It's used in a time context of 1592 to 1407 BC, even though the word was not even used until 1570 AD. We find it in 7 verses, including Exodus 31:7, the tabernacle of the congregation and the ark of the testimony, and the mercy seat that is thereupon, and all the furniture of the tabernacle. And if that's not enough to surprise you, how about the camel's furniture? We find it used in an even earlier time context of 1800 BC. It is found in one verse, Genesis 31:34. Now Rachel had taken the images and put them in the camel's furniture and sat upon them, and Laban searched all the tent, but found them not. Engines. The term is used for 622 to 570 BC, but the first engine was not invented until 1859 AD. It appears in 2 verses, one of which is Ezekiel 26 verse 9. And he shall set engines of war against thy walls, and with his axes he shall break down thy towers. Presidents. The word is used in the historical context of 620 to 588 BC, but the word president was only first used in regards to civil authorities in 1608 AD. Yet it's found in 5 verses in King James Bible, including Daniel 6:3. Then this Daniel was preferred above the presidents and princes, because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king thought to set him over the whole realm. Bottle of milk. It was used in the context of Hagar, who lived somewhere between 1930 and 1840 BC, but bottles weren't even available to the common person until well into the 17th century AD. Bottle of milk is found one time, Judges 4:19, and he said unto her, Give me, I pray thee, a little water to drink, for I am thirsty. And she opened a bottle of milk and gave him drink and covered him. Bottles of wine and of water are found 24 times. The earliest time context is 1355 to 1245 BC, and right up to the 1st century AD, where it replaces wine skins. There had been some earlier experimentation with glass and bottles earlier than the 1600s, but they were way too expensive and too difficult for anyone to make, leave alone common people to have until colonists in Jamestown, Virginia came up with a way to mass produce them for wine making. One well-known instance we find for bottles is in Luke 5, verse 37. "And no man putteth new wine into old bottles, else the new wine will burst the bottles, and be spilled, and the bottles shall perish." As we know, the idea of old bottles breaking from new wine is beyond ridiculous. Wineskins used to become dry and brittle over time, and therefore they would burst from new wine, but bottles would not. A funny instance of this substitution is found in Genesis 21, verse 14. "And Abraham rose up early in the morning and took bread and a bottle of water and gave it unto Hagar, putting it on her shoulder, and the child, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba." Boy, I don't know how she managed to hold a bottle of water on her shoulder while she was carrying the child, but anyway. College. The word appears in 2 verses with the time context of 871 BC and 960 to 609 BC. Yet the first time that the word college was used as an actual location for individuals in common pursuit was in the founding of Harvard College in 1636 AD. The verses where the word college is found are 2 Kings 22:14 and 2 Chronicles 34:22. Please notice that where the word college appears, it is at the end of a phrase, which is oddly placed within a parenthesis. That's the case with both verses. Not only do most of us not remember seeing parentheses used at all in the King James Bible, and certainly not within narratives, but here you will see another supernatural and blasphemous change that is occurring, and that is smiley faces or emojis. According to the Prentice Hall Reference Guide, there is no grammatical reason to place a colon or semicolon next to a right or left parentheses. That's of course how people make smiley faces purely for fun and in informal contexts. Yet you will see these clown faces interspersed throughout the King James Bible, and if you would like to see more of the 80 instances of that, I will leave a link to a video where I present those smiley faces along with a few other grammatical issues now in the King James Bible. Matrix. This word appears in the King James Bible 5 times. It's used in the time period of 1592 to 1407 BC, long before the concept even appeared in the 1550s AD. One of those verses reads, Exodus 13:12, that thou shalt set apart unto the Lord all that openeth the matrix, and every firstling that cometh of a beast which thou hast, the males shall be the Lord's. Razor. This appears 7 times in the time period of 1592 to 1407 BC, even though the process used to create such blades was not even invented until 1740 AD. You can see those verses here, but we find an even more shocking reference to razor in Ezekiel 5:1 pertaining to 622 to 570 BC. Here we see a barber's razor. Ezekiel 5:1 reads, And thou, son of man, take thee a sharp knife, take thee a barber's razor, and cause it to pass upon thine head and upon thy beard. Then take thee balances to weigh and divide the hair. Organ. We find this word used 3 times in the time context of the year 2000 BC, even though no playable organ even existed until the 900s AD. It replaced the word lyre, which David played upon and was a simple, more common instrument. Advertise. People began to use this word of French origin only in the 15th century AD as used to describe announcing information to people. Yet this word is now found in one verse with the time context of 1150 BC. Couch. We find this word 7 times in the King James Bible used for time periods as early as 1841 to 1694 BC, as well as when Jesus walked the earth. Yet couches did not even exist until the 15th century AD, and even then they were known as sofas. Some say that the word couch, as a reference to sofa, was named after a man whose last name was Couch, and that was very recently. Either way, it is a heavy, permanent piece of furniture which up until very recently was known as a sofa, settee, or davenport on which up to 3 people could sit. One of the prominent verses now using the word couch not only anachronistically but nonsensically literally states the following. Luke 5:24, but that ye may know that the Son of Man hath power over earth to forgive sins, parentheses, he said unto the sick of the palsy, comma, parentheses, I say unto thee, arise and take up thy couch and go into thine house. Pilots are now found in 7 scriptures from 622 to 570 BC. The word pilot was first used in 1510 AD when referring to one who directs a ship. Notice the 3rd verse down, Ezekiel 27 verse 28. The suburbs shall shake at the sound of the cry of the pilots. Passengers. And yes, we have passengers now. In 4 different verses going back as early as 622 to 570 BC, we find references to passengers, even though the word was first used as such only in 1915 AD. Here are those verses, and the first one reads, Proverbs 9:15, to call passengers who go right on their ways. Planes. In this case, planes refers to the hand tool that was only invented in 1869. We find one verse used in the context of 740 BC to the 7th century BC. Isaiah 44:13, the carpenter stretcheth out his rule, he marketh it out with a line, he fitteth it with planes, and he marketh it out with the compass, and maketh it after the figure of a man, according to the beauty of a man, that it may remain in the house. Corn is now in the Bible, used in time periods going back to 1850 BC in the Middle East, right up to when Jesus was there. Yet corn was completely unknown to that part of the world until the 1600s. In fact, Columbus in 1492 was the first person outside of the Americas to even know it existed. Yet we have 94 verses all throughout the Bible where it used to read grain, wheat, or crop, now replaced with corn, and making all those verses historically impossible and inaccurate. One well-known example involves Jesus and his disciples in Luke 6:1. And it came to pass on the 2nd Sabbath after the first, that he went through the cornfields, and his disciples plucked the ears of corn, and did eat, rubbing them in their hands. Printed in a book. Our King James Bibles now have one verse in the time context of about 2000 BC, where a man is wishing he could have his thoughts printed in a book. Printing words in a book did not occur for anyone until almost 2,500 years later, in 1476, when Johannes Gutenberg presented the first successful movable type printing press to the world. Yet we read the following in Job 19:23, "Oh, that my words were now written! Oh, that they were printed in a book." Network. In a time period of 1592 to 1407 BC, we see 7 instances of the word network used. The term network did not become used outside of the French-speaking people until 1839 AD at the very earliest. Tires. We know that tires is a recent invention. The wheel is not, but tires are. Charles Goodyear perfected the vulcanization process of heating rubber with sulfur and successfully presented the tire to the world in 1839 AD, of course. Yet we find 2 verses in our King James Bible in which people in 622 to 570 BC were talking about tires. Here's one of them. Isaiah 3:18. In that day the Lord will take away the bravery of their tinkling ornaments about their feet, and their calls, and their round tires like the moon. And believe it or not, they knew about suburbs way back in 1355 BC, according to our changed King James Bibles. The word as we know it today began only in the 17th century AD, yet it has now been added 69 times throughout various Old Testament time periods, even as far back as 1355 BC. Stuff. Yes, they had stuff in the Old Testament and apparently fought over their stuff. This word has been added 13 times to scriptures pertaining to 1836 to 1689 BC. In fact, the word used in this way only began in the 1570s AD at the very earliest, referring to matter of unspecified kind. So using the word for personal belongings didn't come for a few hundred years after that. Check out this verse, Genesis 31:37. Whereas thou hast searched all my stuff, what hast thou found of all thy household stuff? Set it here before my brethren and thy brethren, that they may judge betwixt us both. Wardrobe. We see the word wardrobe added to scriptures in 2 verses, which just happens to be the same 2 verses where we find the word college, along with those smiley faces. I won't read them, but you can see them here. 2 Kings 22:14 and 2 Chronicles 34:22. You might want to check over some of those other names in those verses, since we're finding many new names appearing both in the Old Testament and the New Testament. And finally, witty inventions. In one proverb we read, I, wisdom, dwell with prudence, and find out knowledge of witty inventions. This clearly is a new expression added to the King James Bible. Not only was the word witty not used until the 1580s at the earliest, but the word inventions, used for things which one creates, was not used at least until the 1510s. Surely Solomon, who lived from 1011 to 931 BC, did not say anything close to witty inventions. Thankfully, we can further confirm that by looking at various other translations, most of which were originally made from how the King James used to read. You can see here expressions like knowledge and discretion and knowledge and discernment, but certainly not knowledge and witty inventions. So now you've seen some of the supernatural changes that have taken place in our King James Bibles. For many of those changes, we can still find confirmation of what we remembered by looking at other translations, as we just did. However, those other translations are changing at a rapid rate, and many of the changes already appear in every single one of those translations. The sooner you can examine this matter for yourself, the better. One day you may see a change that you recognize to be a change, but possibly all the other translations by then may have changed as well. We are at the end. Daniel was told, roll up and seal the words of the scroll until the time of the end. And at the end of his vision, John was told, do not seal or protect the words of the prophecy of the scroll, because the time is near. We are at that time today. With scriptures changing the way you just saw, we're facing the very famine Hosea warned about, a famine for hearing from the Lord. There will be no more hearing from God through the written records, because they have already been given over to Satan, just as the Holy Spirit said they would. Only those who hear from God through the Holy Spirit directly will hear from God. Only those who hide his words in their heart will know what he said. The intruder is here. He is subtle, he is gradual, and he is supernaturally modifying a written book to fit his one-world religion. Don't put this issue aside. It will affect the truth you yourself believe, as well as the truth that your loved ones believe as well. I look forward to talking to you next time. The Lord bless you.